The New York Times had an interesting piece on the minimum wage. They compiled some very basic facts that most people, unfortunately, are unaware of on this topic. There's a right-wing talking point that's been around for decades where they say, oh, you don't have to worry about the minimum wage. It's not a big deal. It shouldn't be a main focus because it's only teenagers who make a minimum wage, and it's for their summer job in between going to school, so look the other way, not a big deal. Well, they looked into that, and it's incorrect. In fact, only 24% of minimum wage earners are teens. So well over 70% of minimum wage earners are people who need that, and they're working it as their main job. Okay, and that shouldn't really come as a surprise to anybody because, I mean, think about the fact that there are more people looking for jobs than there are job openings. So the basic math would say that some people are going to take minimum wage jobs because they need it to have some sort of income. They say, quote, raising the minimum wage to just $10.10 an hour would lift 3.5 million people of color out of poverty. And that's not even the entire number of people in total who would be lifted out of poverty. Get this, the minimum wage in 1968 was $1.60 an hour. Now that sounds like it's nothing, right? It sounds like a really, really pathetically low number, but that's not true. Because in today's dollars, that's equal to $10.56 an hour. That means workers are paid less today than they were in 1968. How sad is that? Now we get into even more mind-blowing facts. Worker productivity has more than doubled since 1968. And if the minimum wage simply had kept up with the pace of productivity gains, it would be $21.72 an hour today. How unbelievable is that? So you know how people always say, well, capitalism is a meritocracy. The harder you work, the further you go. You always get what you deserve. If you're working for an employer, they're not ripping you off. You agreed to pay it to a certain number, and you're always getting the amount of money that you're worth. However much you produce is what you get. Simply not true. In fact, wages are held artificially low to help the corporations and the rich, and you, the average worker, are getting screwed over because if you simply got the money that you produced, it would be $21.72 an hour. It gets worse. Quote, if the federal minimum wage had grown at the same rate as 1%er earnings, it would sit at $22.62 per hour today, which is a 212% increase than the current wage floor. So that's just how much you're getting screwed over. And of course, I don't even need to bring up the poll numbers. 80% of the American people are in favor of a minimum wage hike. This is a non-issue. This is a no-brainer to the American people. It's a majority of Democrats, a majority of independents, and yes, a majority of Republicans who all say, raise it, we're ready to do it right now. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So the main question becomes, why aren't they doing it? What is stopping the politicians from doing what everybody in America wants them to do? Well, the answer is simple. There's only one tiny group of people that does not want the minimum wage raised. The corporations and the rich. The elite, in other words. And our government does not represent you and me and average Americans. It represents the elite, the rich and the corporations. They pay the politicians when they're running their campaigns. They promise them $1 million jobs when they're out of office. So the politicians will always do the bidding of the elite and not do the bidding of your average people like us. And that's why, in the final tally, we are getting screwed on this issue.